So, a fresh new week has arrived, and here on this channel, that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend, I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week, based on what's going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week was filled with some primetime battles between some top teams, and there were a ton of big-time individual performances that went down, so we definitely have plenty to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now. So if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, I want to thank PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. PrizePicks is a skill-based, real-money, daily fantasy sports game where you select 2 to 6 players and guess if they will hit more or less than their projection. And if you get it right, you can win! Plus, with their new Demons and Goblins lines, you can now win up to 100 times your original entry. Obviously, we're all basketball fans here, but PrizePicks has almost every sport you can think of available to choose from and play. To add to the fun, they also offer frequent bonuses, discounts, and weekly promotions, such as Taco Tuesday and Flex Friday, plus so many more specialty free spaces to watch for throughout the year, so you don't want to miss those. For today's slate of games, I'm going with Klay Thompson to score over 14.5 points, Bradley Beal to make over 1.5 threes, and Grant Williams to grab over 5 rebounds in this week's entry. To sign up, go down to the link in the description and use promo code reference when you sign up to get a deposit match bonus of up to $100. Once again, thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring the video. Now let's get back to the topic at hand. The first take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Shortballa, and he says that the Pelicans are this year's playoff dark horse that can sneakily make a lot of noise now that everyone is healthy and their depth is proving to be as good as it gets. The West is shaping up to be a bloodbath this season, with so many teams fighting for positioning right now. The same top 4 has been in place for most of the year, with the Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets, and Clippers being just a few games away from each other at the top. Then teams like the Lakers and Warriors have gotten a lot of attention for their inconsistent battles trying to break into the playoff picture, and the Mavericks and Suns are teams in that middle tier still figuring things out as well, but the Pelicans are the group quietly dominating lately without getting nearly as much attention for it. They've made their way up to 5th place in the West now, sitting 3 games behind the Clippers, who mark the end of that top tier that I just mentioned, and with the way they're playing, they very well could end up challenging for that kind of positioning as well. In their last 3 games, they've been obliterating their opposition, smoking the Pacers by 27 points, then the Raptors by 41 points, and then the 76ers by only 8 points last game, but they were winning by 30 for a lot of that game before taking their foot off the gas at the end. Before the season began, I actually talked quite a bit about how I thought the Pelicans would be the dark horse to contend this year, so with that take in particular, it's almost being directed right at me, because my belief is now starting to be justified, now that everyone is back healthy. The Pelicans have dealt with quite a bit of injury setbacks this season to some of their more important rotational pieces, as Trey Murphy has missed 25 games, CJ McCollum has missed 16 games, Larry Nance has missed 18 games, Jose Alvarado has missed 21 games, and Jonas Valanciunas is actually the only player on the team that has played in every game for them so far, so you see that other guys, top and bottom, have missed a few games here and there as well. The biggest key to the Pelicans' chances comes down to Zion Williamson at the end of the day though. Williamson has actually been one of the team's healthier players this year for the first time in a while, and even though his individual production is down compared to prior years, his physicality attacking the basket is essential to open things up for everybody else. Zion has no playoff experience yet, but we have seen Brandon Ingram step his game up in the playoffs in 2022, CJ McCollum has a history of elevating his play in the playoffs as well, and they definitely have a deep roster filled with highly touted defenders and shooters around those guys. We've seen teams make unprecedented deep playoff runs plenty of times recently, with the Miami Heat at the 8 seed doing it last year, and the Atlanta Hawks doing it in 2021, but Zion Williamson needs to be at his best for them to be able to accomplish that, which is still to be determined if that's going to be there. The next take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Nicola, and he says that the only thing holding the Celtics back from winning it all is Jayson Tatum being their first option. In the NBA, there's a lot that obviously goes into winning a championship, but arguably more so than any other sport, the champions are typically led by a top-tier superstar. Obviously, you need to have a stout team defense, you need a deep and balanced rotation with good bench and role players that fit in their spots, and you need more than one star more often than not. But if your number one guy isn't in that top tier of talent, then it's still quite difficult. That's a conundrum that has been debated about a ton regarding Jayson Tatum, and whether or not he is in that tier or not, because he's someone who is right on the fringe of it, between that superstar tier and the all-star tier. Anthony Davis is another player who at his best was in a similar position back when he was on the Pelicans, because he was definitely a stud both offensively and defensively, but realistically he wasn't the kind of player who could lead a championship contender as the number one. So when he went to the Lakers and embraced playing alongside LeBron James, who has been the league's number one longer than many of you have been alive for, then he thrived, and they won the title in 2020. Unlike Davis's Pelicans teams though, Tatum's Celtics are much more stacked around him. Jaylen Brown is a multiple-time All-Star, Drew Holiday is a former All-Star with championship pedigree, Derek White is arguably the best role player in the entire NBA right now, Kristaps Porzingis might be the best third option in the league who can dominate mismatches, and Al Horford always shows up for the big matchups. There have been so many occasions where the Celtics handily beat teams and Tatum hasn't even had to do much, which isn't something that can really be said about other superstars, because typically when those guys don't show up, their team gets blown out. But just because the Celtics are capable of doing that in the regular season doesn't mean they can get away with it in the playoffs. Tatum had a terrible showing in the 2022 NBA Finals against Steph Curry and the Warriors. He has historically been outplayed head-to-head by Jimmy Butler, and he hasn't really been forced to prove that he can carry a team when they need it, because of all of the talent around him. So while obviously the Celtics are one of the favorites to win it all this season, I do understand why some are hesitant to fully back them to actually do it. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Nafa, and he says that the Sixers' season is already over, and any hope of them getting back on track before the playoffs is dead. The Joel Embiid injury was a huge blow at the time, but it wasn't necessarily clear when it happened if he was going to be able to recover in time for the playoffs. The Sixers were one of the best teams in the East when he was on the court, and Embiid himself was on track to win his second consecutive MVP award, so of course everyone was hopeful for a speedy recovery for him, but in his absence, the Sixers have completely fallen apart. They've gone from 3rd place in the East to 7th and could continue sliding, with the Pacers just a half game behind them in the standings, and at this point, it seems all but certain that they'll be in the play-in tournament, and if that's the case, then I have a hard time buying into the idea of rushing Joel Embiid back onto the court. For one, even if Embiid is able to recover from the knee procedure he got done in time for playoff basketball, he's not going to just be able to get right back to being the dominant force that he was for most of the year. He likely hasn't been able to do all that much physically while his knee heals, so he's definitely not in game shape right now, and he'll also be pretty rusty, having not played basketball in about 2 months. Joel Embiid has a long history of trying to play through injury in the past and rushing back onto the court earlier than he should have, sacrificing his body in the process. So if I'm being completely honest, I think he needs to just take it easy and get himself back to 100% health and not rush back to the court. The Sixers are not going to make a deep run as the 8th seed with a less than 100% Joel Embiid, so risking his long-term health even further would be just irresponsible at that point. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes we discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.